What is up, you muffin munching muggles? Welcome to Fiction and Reality, where we help you, yes, you become the most devilishly gifted human that you know you are and that you knew you always could be. Today we will be talking about how to best capture conflict. What? You got a freaking problem with that, man? Then so I would ask you to squareth thy hands and runneth thy fate.
We straight gassing, cutting straight to the bricks.
The cells are waking up.
The bugs are back.
I define conflict as a vice grip, a competing struggle between two separate entities who are locked in a fervent battle both externally and internally to topple the obstacles, whether that comes in the form of another individual or their own inner psyche that would dare carve a web of justice and displace their definitive truths. And you just can't have conflict without adamantly championing a reason for drawing your blade. So we'll walk through some step-by-step writing tips on how you can progressively compound conflict to push forward character development and pry open the jaws of revolution.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
Here's how you break out your external conflict and begin sort of contouring your revolution. In the case of external conflict, you must first define the goal that your two entities will be clashing over and what type of individuals ascribe to those goals. Ah, yes, it is primitive, like cats and dogs quarreling over fishes and bones. It makes us bloodthirsty, teeth-bearing animals. First, you'll want to discern the gondola of ideals, virtues, morals, and motives that they've sworn their undying loyalty to. Second, have something or someone who opposes those vital aspects of their prefecture stand in the way. And three, if you're dealing with revolution, assign leaders to both sides. The perceived oppressor and oppressed who will attenuate those virtues and carry the torch of rebellion or repression on either side. In Dishonored, Corvo Attano, who went on a not-so-G-rated excursion through the city of Dunwall after the Lord Regent, and a happy helping of enforcers orchestrated a plot to have the Empress assassinated, his lover, he set out to lay waste to the corrupt regime of enforcers. He does so with the motive of defending and avenging the Empress's honor. And of course, the Lord Regent took advantage of every and any opportunity in his arsenal to keep his own system of power and oppression and ordinance, even to the point of cooking up these bird-beaked metal devils. God, I hated those things.
This playback indicates some detection without certainty.
So if you don't know where to start and you're scraping and scrambling for ways to spark the flames of conflict, start by defining a goal. By doing so, you'll knock out two birds with one stone by offering your readers or audience an idea of what exactly the character in question's mission is and why they fight so passionately to defend it. Now, I want you to grab a shovel because we're going to be digging deep into external conflict here. So you've got your goals, but look at yourself. Shaking like a sad, lost little puppy. You have no idea what to do with it. Sparking the flames of conflict. Boom. You should understand that conflict is not simply one mass clash of virtues, but rather like a constellation with each star interconnecting with each other, link by link, horizon over horizon to paint a spackling holistic image. And thus, well-constructed conflict amasses to just that. It's like the tick damage you get from getting hit by one of Legion's goo mines or the old scarlet rot in Elden Ring. It all creeps up to burst damage. Quit invading me while I'm farming for the clean rot armor. Anywho, you need one single event in which these two parties will engage and to set off the entire chain of conflicting events. Like a gunshot or better yet, a kick. How wondrous were those chain of events in Attack on Titan. Eren Yeager's conflict in Attack on Titan is not a single clash of ideologies, but a constellation of interconnected struggles that evolve and intertwine. Each star in this constellation represents a different dimension of his journey, his hatred for the Titans, his newfound betrayal of Reiner and Berthold, and eventually his moral and existential conflict with the global forces outside Paradise, where he had once looked toward for hope of a sovereign life, as well as within the walls where his friends or the Alliance rebelled against the ideology of the Rumbling. These elements form a sprawling network of opposition, linking his personal vendetta to his role as a revolutionary leader and a perceived oppressor. The horizon expands with each revelation, painting a complex tapestry of ideals, betrayals, and ambitions, where every conflict informs and escalates to another one. Remember that we cannot ignore the fact that there is an opposition or a force opposing the protagonist or your entity of interest with regard to external conflict, and that opposition also has their own rhyme of reason, ideals to fight for. Through the spark of events which sets fire to the chain of candles, they should feel just as charged or sort of raring to compete for their goal as the other party. For Reiner, that meant completing his mission to capture the founding Titan through any means necessary, especially after watching his comrade get chopped to little bits like a McNugget combo meal. Even when they returned to Marley empty-handed to prevent the destruction of the world where his family and the younger Eldians resided, the upcoming warriors, whether it was out of a devout loyalty or fear as an Eldian warrior shifter, he sought out the resolve to keep moving forward like Eren. Once again, when Eren rolled up like Curry in the Fourth, talking about "we are the same," then nuked an entire crowd of people, the flames of rebellion spread to the Marleyan soldiers and the rest of the world in attendance. Do some real deep digging and diving when you're rummaging through these ideas that help you create this apical event. Don't get too bogged down and engrossed in the grandiose things that you may overlook the minuscule elements that feed into them. And here are some questions that can help you sort of model this turning point event. Why would each entity care that the event took place in the first place? What exactly are both sides gaining or losing? What specifically within the event charges them to actively defend what they hold dear? Is it something externally lost, like a concrete artifact or crown jewel of the establishment? Is it something intrinsic they've lost, a slash at their reputation, a degradation of their morals or pride? How will each side react to this loss or gain? You will want to keep the external struggle alive. How do you keep the external struggle alive? Well, with regard to conflict and revolution, you'll need to have the balance of powers fluctuating between these two clashing forces.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean completely devouring the power of the oppressive legion, right? But rather having them lose and win some small battles against the lesser beings or the oppressed. You know, it's like when you look like you're down and out, but you're really just pretending to be dead. You're basically just creeping enough to the edge, enough to teeter on the cusps, and then slowly draining back down. Let me cut that out. I don't know. In Code Geass, the Black Knights, a resistance force led by Lelouch v. Britannia, faces off against the Britannian forces who prioritize subjugation and imperial dominance over nations of Japan and relish in their own victories. Black Knights managed to defeat the military forces in many instances, creating a massive symbolic victory. However, they're not able to completely topple the Empire's power structure. And even when they have certain points of advantage, where everything is going according to Lelouch's plan, such as when he was forming an alliance with his half-sister, Yuffie, as part of his broader strategy for revolution, there always was confounding to spin the wheel of fortune the other way, which in this case was him not realizing that his Geass had a cooldown and that he accidentally used it to force his kind and compassionate sister.
Okay, soldiers, please kill the Japanese!
His kind and compassionate sister to order the Japanese to be killed. Awkward. Keeping the external struggle alive requires a dynamic and fluctuating balance of power between the opposing forces. The balance doesn't need to be a complete and immediate overthrow of the oppressive power, but rather a series of victories and setbacks that creates tension and uncertainty. The lesser beings, often the rebels or the oppressed, should win small battles that chip away at the dominant force, offering hope and progress while also experiencing defeats that reinforce the strength of the oppressor. Constant shifts in power keep the conflict engaging and heighten the stakes, ensuring that the revolution feels like a complex, ongoing battle rather than a static struggle. This fluctuation fuels both the internal motivations of the characters and the external momentum of the story, making the eventual resolution both satisfying and hard-earned. If you really want your conflict to come alive, you need to raise the stakes. Here's how you do it. So with regard to conflict and revolution, the most common accolade each council is striving for tends to be the power to set their own spectrum of postulates or policies into play and to rear the world in the direction they see fit. Alright, so with regard to conflict and revolution, the most common accolade each council is striving for tends to be the power to set their own spectrum of postulates or policies into play and to rear the world in the direction they see fit. Whether you are the oppressed or oppressor, or at baseline just two conflicting parties squabbling on equal ground, you're fighting for the ability to constrict the other party's freedom by way of expansion of your own. If you want to raise the stakes, spark an event between this seemingly infinite shift and balance of powers that mediates that shift and places the thing that the entities are struggling to protect at jeopardy of being lost to the other side. It's essentially like a game of Russian roulette, right? Taking a gallant risk for the mere hope of gaining an even larger advantage over the other side. If you hear the hammer click and there's no discharge, then that draws the opposing side just that much closer to death or toward losing whatever it is they're trying to protect. This event doesn't even have to thread into direct external conflict. It can be informational. Remember the interconnected stars of conflict slowly compounding and growing larger towards an inflection point as they connect to each other. In Attack on Titan, one of those events was the discovery of the Attack Titan's true abilities. Walking the paths with Zeke, who thought he was sort of big broing Eren, Eren reveals his ability to interact with the past by manipulating his father Grisha to fulfill actions that align with Eren's ultimate goal of initiating the rumbling. This revelation shocks Zeke, who once again believed he was the one in control of their journey through the paths and the holder of the ultimate power. Then we just get a crazy rotoscope of his dad geeking out in the fields, talking about how he crushed children and killed a family or something. Hey man, Eren wasn't really asking that much from you, dude. Or it can come in the form of something external like betrayal that completely shifts the chips to the other end of the spectrum, forcing the other party to amend their approach to the conflict. And let's not forget when your boy Zeke was on the fringes of activating the rumbling and was being asked by Cole not to scream. Since his brother Falco had drunk the magic Kool-Aid that would have turned him into a Titan. And what do you think old Zeke boy did to one of his beloved warrior candidates?
Don't do this.
I understand. And I'm so sorry.
Yep, poor Falco. All in all, raising the stakes is something that you have to do to transition the balance of power between the two conflicting forces to keep both your story and the audience completely engaged and drooling over what's going to happen next. Now we have to tackle another beast. Internal conflict. Hey, internal conflict's important to you, right? No? What do you mean no?
Who are you talking to right now?
It is when you're arguing with yourself to sleep every night or choking out your pillow. Definitely not projecting. Here's how you amplify it to the highest of your ability. Internal conflict is nothing more but the struggle within the mind of a character, their hesitancy to take action, how they cope with the consequences of their action, and how they justify the right to take action in accordance with their own morality and code of ethics. Here's the way to unleash its full potential. When you construct a concrete philosophy for both conflicting parties, the quickest way to create dynamic conflict and dynamic characters is to have their ladder of virtues topple with each turn of an engagement or amendment in some fashion, whether that be enriching some of their current ideals or repressing others, or maybe even adopting more or new ones. Also explore the clashing of minds. The philosophical clashing of each character or entity as a whole is a key to driving your conflict or revolution forward and streaking through that constellation of interconnected conflict, progressively driving towards an hit. Voila!
Voila! In view, a humble vaudevillian veteran, cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate. This visage, no mere veneer of vanity, is a vestige of the vox populi, now vacant, vanished.
How's that for an alliteration? In V for Vendetta, V's revolution pits the ideal of absolute freedom against the government's pursuit of total control. The Norse Fire regime claims to maintain order and safety by sacrificing personal liberties, justifying its actions as a necessary evil to prevent chaos. V challenges this by exposing the regime's hypocrisy and cruelty, using public spectacles like the destruction of the Old Bailey and the broadcast hijacking to reveal the truth to the people. Oh no, not the Old Bailey. These acts are not just attacks on infrastructure, but direct assaults on the ideology of fear and conformity. By turning symbols of power into symbols of resistance, V forces the regime to confront its vulnerability and exposes the people to the possibility of reclaiming power. In Attack on Titan, Zeke's belief in mercy through euthanasia, freedom of release from suffering, stands in stark contrast to Eren's vision of freedom through destruction and dominance. The clash in the past reveals that each side seeks to impose its ideology on the other, constraining the other's freedom to enact its vision. Eren's ability to override Zeke's control symbolizes how revolutions often hinge on key moments where one party decisively shifts the balance of power. Come on, Zeke, man. Son by Levi not once, but twice. Actually 3 times. And then getting little broed by your little bro? While opposing his father's authoritarian vision, Lelouch recognizes his own descent into manipulation and deceit to achieve his goals. The Geass, the power of domination, embodies the very crux of the freedom Lelouch claims to fight for. It forces him to question whether his revolution is merely a different form of tyranny, and whether he's any different from his father. Well, Lelouch is a tyrant, you know, sometimes he just makes little silly jokes. To Charles, Lelouch's ideology of freedom and individuality is misguided. He believes that humanity's pursuit of freedom leads only to chaos and destruction. In his eyes, Lelouch is perpetuating the very cycles of violence and suffering that Charles seeks to end, using manipulation and the Geass to achieve his aim, a hypocrisy that Charles does not fail to point out during their confrontation. Bringing the opposition's morals to the forefront can paint a clear picture of just what each side is fighting for and keep their bouts sort of dynamic while their minds shift with the tide of revolution, war, whatever conflict is at play. Finally, you'll need to learn how to bring your conflict and revolution to a resolution. The way I see it, you have maybe 2 options. One side claims the power they need to expand their freedom while pressing the opposing force, or 2, both sides abandon the conflict through an equalizing event. Now, what do I mean by an equalizing event? Maybe some profound figure was able to idealistically shift the paradigm of the opposing force and encourage them to lay down their arms. In most cases, one side just beats the other until they're black and blue in the face and then enacts their own code of justice upon the masses. Kind of like Corvo, right? Who hacked and slashed his way to Lord Regent. Or Lelouch, when his plight came to an end with his death. But the revolution of Zero lived on, and the fires of rebellion still crackle. V's willingness to sacrifice his own life to pay the ultimate cost for revolution and awaken the people to the power they have when they're unified against a tyrannical system. Or Eren when he... Let's not even talk about that, honestly. So bring a definitive resolution to the conflict and snuff out the embers of revolution to satisfy your audience. Flesh out the sort of minds of the oppressors and the oppressed and have them clash in a philosophical dance of virtues and ethics, forever shifting through the small but ever expanding constellations of conflict. By mastering these rules with both external and internal conflicts, your world will yield unfathomable growth for not just your characters, but the development of your entire society and world as a whole. Now, I know you feel like punching something after that long talk about conflict, right? Well, if you took something from this video, why don't you go ahead and punch that like button and subscribe button. Subscribe and like the video. It pushes these videos out so that others can take key tokens that you've gained. So do your fellow comrades a favor, man. Still delayed on the stream, I know. Really crazy week for me and it's about to get crazier, but keep looking at the community section for updates over the weekend. Maybe something will change. I will leave a link to my socials in the description below. And with that, remember, if ever you're lost in a forestry of words, strip your mind from fantasy and look to the window of the world. And there your mind will run free.